Hi everyone, I hope you are managing to stay safe and well during lockdown and keeping up the creativity. This video today is all about painting sunsets, how to capture nature's finest display, something which has fascinated artists for centuries and appears quite regularly throughout art history. From Turner's Fighting Temeraire, Scarlet Sunset, through to Monet's haystack paintings, all the way through to contemporary art. Michael Fairclough, for example, who uses a lot of texture and sawdust in his paint, and he paints almost exclusively sunsets. For some, the sunset is a pictorial cliche. For others, it's a guilty pleasure. Always a technical challenge, that's for sure. For me, I fall into the latter category, and I've always enjoyed painting sunsets, particularly on plein air, directly on the spot. That little pocket of time, that transition between, twilight and evening. Here, for example, behind me are two pictures that I made on the spot a few years ago in Sweden. This picture was painted on a little island off the coast of Stockholm, midsummer, about 9:30 in the evening. Very warm, humid evening. Lots of mosquitoes. I was very, very badly bitten as I was painting the picture. But it captures the moment when the sun has just gone down and there's that warm kind of afterglow in the sky, that transition between early evening and darkness, that twilight period of time, which is a kind of fascinating psychological pocket of time. This picture, again, painted on the spot, same time of year, midsummer, a different island this time, off the coast of Gothenburg. Painted very quickly in about half an hour on a very dark Prussian blue ground, and again, it captures that moment when the sun just disappears behind the trees. So again, you've got a slight warm afterglow, but a very, very dark, dramatic, silhouette-like composition. Okay everyone, so the aim of the video is to try to recreate the painting that I made in Sweden in acrylic. This is the palette we'll be using for the painting. It's a good idea to set your palette out systematically so you more or less put the same colours in the same place each time. That way you develop a familiarity with the layout of your palette, and it becomes a little bit more automatic where you can find certain colours as you're mixing your way around. It also leaves the maximum amount of space in which to mix the colour. Also, you can see I've put all the warm colours down one side. We've got a couple of reds here, 3 reds, a couple of yellows, cadmium yellow, cadmium lemon, permanent rose, cadmium red, alizarin crimson. The cooler, darker colours down the other side of the palette. I've got for cobalt blue, cerulean blue, and an ivory black. In terms of the brushes, just a large, medium and small hog brush will do the trick. So the next stage is to do a simple underdrawing to establish the basic composition of the picture, and for that I'm using a little bit of cobalt blue with plenty of water, and we just look down the side of our image, okay, to look where the key moments are in terms of horizontal bands. We can see, for example, that this first horizontal band, the main forward zone here, takes place probably about a quarter of the way up the picture. Okay, so we're a little demarcation spot there. Okay, the trees, again, they're about a third of the way up. That's the next band of information. They're about roughly just over a third, so about here. Same on the other side. If you're not confident in drawing horizontal lines, it's a good idea to use little dots across the page like this, and then you can almost literally join up the dots, okay, to give you a straight line across the painting. We're using a tone ground In this instance, it's raw umber, which is a nice kind of mid-neutral earth kind of tone. And the reason for doing that is that we already have a mid-tone to work against, so we can pitch the lights and the darker tones easier against a mid-tone. Sometimes when you're working on a pure white ground, it's very, very difficult to judge the lights and the dark straight away. Sometimes you end up painting in a key that's too light or that's too dark. But when you've already got a mid-tone to work against, it's easier to pitch the lights and the darks against this mid-tone. So that's the reason why I'm using a toned ground. Okay, so now we are going to attempt to paint the sky. It's a very pale, almost warm blue. So I'm going to use cerulean blue with plenty of white and a little touch, only a touch of cadmium lemon to knock the sky in. I'm going to try and paint this quite thickly, not using too much water. I don't want to dilute the paint too much. So plenty of titanium white with a little touch of cerulean, and again a small touch of cadmium lemon, just to warm up the sky a little bit. Plenty of white. Okay, and this is the way I would have painted it on the spot. Okay, quite directly, quite thickly, almost working a bit like writing a letter, starting at the top left-hand side and working my way across. Okay, just putting the paint on quite loosely, very direct. Now, as the sky moves further down, we begin to move from this cerulean blue tone into a slightly warmer orange tone. So cadmium yellow, a tiny little bit of permanent rose will just begin to suggest this sort of orange, warm tinge to the blue. Just begins to warm up a little bit, just a touch, just about here. Okay, so again, I'm just using this paint very, very loosely, almost scrubbing it onto the paper, really. Yellow, I'm going to add a touch of cadmium red to the mix. So we've got cadmium yellow, cadmium red, and a bit of permanent rose. It's starting to get a little bit warmer here, just a little bit. Again, just working in these horizontal bands. I'm increasing the amount of my warm colour, so I'm adding cadmium yellow, permanent rose, and a little bit of cadmium red to the mix. It's just starting to pick up and get a slightly warmer look. So again, I'm just allowing each band to subtly diffuse into the previous band. I'm going to take that all the way down to the bottom of the trees here. Look, right the way down. I'm taking it all the way down because this is a dark colour. These clouds, this band of cloud is a darker tone. I can crash that over the top of the warm tone behind. So I'm very, very quickly take this warm tone and take it all the way down to the point at which the trees take place here. To paint the clouds, okay, there's a little bit of warmth in those clouds. So cobalt blue, alizarin crimson, and ivory black. Okay, that's roughly about it. It could go possibly slightly darker, so I might just increase the amount of ivory black. I'm going to use a bit like the Impressionists used to, this flat, almost wedge-like mark. And just drag it right across my sky. Imagining where the trees are. The trees coming about here. So again, I'm allowing the paint to drag over the warm ground that I've put in there. Now it gets a little bit lighter across here, look, just slightly lighter. So I'm going to increase the amount of white and cadmium yellow, just a tiny little touch, not too much, just to alter it slightly. So it just, now there, we can take it down to our little warm band of tone that we've got. Right on the horizon line there, just in there. Okay, now I'm going to take this band and I'm going to allow it to just extend over to the left-hand side of the painting. Okay, and we just get that little soft half tone in there, just in here. just using the side of the brush and just literally, again, almost impressionist style, really, I suppose you could say. Just touching in the little bits of cloud. Now here I'm going back to the original mix of cobalt blue, ivory black, and alizarin crimson. So the clouds are quite dark across here. Okay, so again, so the paint is just dragging over the warm ground underneath. And there's our sky, the first section of our painting. Okay, so now we are at the stage where we can put in this band of trees here. Okay, now obviously they're very dark, almost silhouette-like, but what we're not going to do is use pure black on its own. That will be far too obtrusive and too monochromatic. So we're going to add some cobalt blue and some alizarin crimson into the ivory black to paint our trees. So cobalt blue, ivory black, and alizarin crimson. That just tempers the black and just makes it sit into the painting. These trees, because of the time of the evening, are very, very, obviously very, very silhouette-like against that warm sky. I'm using a smaller wedge-type brush here just to pick up the shape of the, I think there were spruce trees, actually, pine trees in there. Okay, thinking about the width and the depth of the trees, so we don't make them too dominant. Also being aware of keeping the base of the tree, or the trees, as horizontal as we can. Okay, and I'm just using, again, this small brush to literally going up to my sky. The size of the brush is perfect for this job because it almost describes the shape of the trees as you're going along. You don't have to worry too much about changing brush size here. Okay, now we can go into that next band of trees, in the middle distance. That little drop down suggests, remember, this is coming slightly further forward in space, so I'm just going to drop that down a little bit more there, just in that little area there, look, just so the trees begin to come forward in space. So the next step is to think about this big reflective area in the foreground, the lake. Okay, so we're going to block that in next. So for that, I'm going to use a slightly larger brush, bigger area. Okay, and we're going to attempt to block this in one go. So it tends to reflect the colour of the sky. So we're going to go back to that cerulean blue with a little bit of cadmium lemon. Okay, not too much. Okay, but we're going to add a little bit more warmth to it. So we're going to add more of the cadmium yellow and cadmium red combo. Yeah, look, we're going to take that right up to our trees again, thinking of keeping it a straight line if you can. I'm going to take this all the way down to the bottom actually, because it means we can take the dark silhouette-like shape of this jetty over the top of our reflected lake. So, just again, picking up this area here, look. Now that's a general kind of feeling for the lake going across our picture. A general kind of sense of the reflection of what's going on above. But now, of course, we've got to bring in those two jetties into the foreground to finalise our composition. So, again, going back to the smaller synthetic brush. Okay, so you've got more control over the drawing. Blue. So again, we're going to put this little jetty area in the foreground. There's the top of the jetty, there's the base of the jetty, there's the end of the jetty, probably about here. We said roughly just short of halfway across, remember, so about there. Okay, and I'm going to just drag it across, thinking about the structure of what's going on. There's these little uprights in the foreground. So again, cobalt blue, ivory black, and alizarin crimson is the key to this. Pure ivory black, remember, would be too obtrusive. It would just jump straight out of the painting. It wouldn't sit. So again, I'm just blocking this in with this small wedge-like brush. Now here, we start to get into the reflected areas of the water. So again, thinking about how perhaps the Impressionists might have approached this. Taking the brush and just letting the marks drag across the surface of the acrylic, you get this little sense of reflection going on. Just in the foreground here. So I'm just going to make sure we get the reflection of this little upright, just in here. Doesn't have to be perfect, just a little suggestion of it, remember. Doesn't have to be perfect. And this is where the jetty comes right into the foreground, just here. Okay, so there's the left-hand side of our painting, more or less established. Okay, the right-hand side, if we look, we mentioned it came roughly about a quarter of the way across, probably slightly less than that. Okay, so again, going back to the mix of cobalt, alizarin crimson and ivory black. Just follow this straight across with your brush to get the height right. Starts about here. Okay, starts to move slightly across like this. Now again, I'm painting quite thickly, so you get that little bit of drag, which is great. We've got these uprights again. How many we've got? We've got 4 of those. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the wall will come down like this. Okay. And then we've got the reflection. So this is where the dragged brush mark comes into its own. Just letting that drag across the surface of the painting. And the final thing is to, again using the small brush, okay, just go into the jetty and we can reintroduce a few little negative spaces in there where we can see through, just in there, not many of them, just the odd one. Again, if you feel as though you perhaps put too many dark reflections in the water, okay, you can okay, so finally, just right on the top of the sunset there, top of the lake, I beg your pardon, we get the little highlight across the top. So just here, just picking up that with a little bit more clarity, so it's slightly cleaner. And there's our sunset, our Swedish archipelago sunset. So I hope you have a lot of fun attempting your sunsets. Don't forget, if you're feeling energetic, you can get up early in the morning and try a sunrise. That can be as spectacular. It's best if you can work on the spot. If we're lucky enough to get an interesting sunset over the next week or so, that would be great. But if you want to work on a photograph, that's fine. But still, we're facing all the same formal challenges of colour, space, shape, composition, mark, gesture and so on. All those same formal challenges are there. So we look forward to seeing the results of your labour in due course. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay well and enjoy your painting. Bye for now.